Hello and welcome back to the Single Malt Frontier, where we explore the edge of innovation in American single malt whiskey. Here on the show, we do a little bit of tasting and a lot of talking. Usually, we talk about whiskey, but the best thing about whiskey is the conversations we get to have along the way, and we get to talking about a little bit of everything. I'm your host, Doug, or as I'm known around the internet, Demi Tastes. I'm joined today, as usual, by my co-host, Phil of the Rangers Respite. And our special guest today is our first ever guest on the podcast in episode number 1, but representing a new brand this time. Joseph O'Sullivan, Master Distiller of Minden Mill. Back on episode number 1, he was Master Distiller of Clear Creek Distillery, had been recently promoted, and in the time since has made the move to a new brand, which was previously a closed distillery, briefly a ghost distillery, I guess we could say. Joe has brought that distillery back to life by building out a brand new brand portfolio under the new name Minden Mill Distilling. And we're going to talk today about those whiskeys, the bourbon, the rye, the American single malt, and what it's been like to build a brand from scratch. So just to spoil you guys really early, we've gotten a taste to try all of these whiskeys months and months ago. They're all great. But there's something special about each of them. Even though it's a bourbon, it's a rye, and it's an American single malt, they are standouts flavor profile wise in their categories. We'll get more into that later. By the way, today is a live streamed interview, which we haven't done too much of recently, actually. So to the live audience, thank you for being here. We have a live chat today, and actually there's a new feature in StreamYard, so we can show a running chat commentary on the screen. I'm not sure, but it's actually not showing anything right now. There you go. Yeah. So I guess if we have it up on screen,
Pod guys.
This is a brand new thing. So pod guys, thanks for joining in. Old Man's Irish Pub. This is the gentleman formerly known as The Pawn, who now has his own YouTube channel. Check that out. And let's see if I turn this back off and back on. It actually clears the chat. Sorry, Whiskey Punkard. Thanks for joining, Ben. So yeah, we've got a live chat. So you'll be able to see your comments on screen in real time. If somebody says something awful, I'll hide it. So behave yourselves. This is a new feature. Well, it's cool to try that out.
I'm so happy to be here, Doug. It's been too long. I know that everyone understands how busy I've been, but I don't want anyone in the lodge to think that it's anything except for I'm kind of always, I'm just burning the candle and wanting to make something really cool, and I'm having a blast.
Okay, we have to ban Bartolome now. She said something awful.
I'm so happy to be here. Has it really? How long has it been?
So you did previously come on the show, not on the show. It wasn't a podcast episode, but we did a live stream for Burns Night in January 2024. So that is the last time you were on our stream. But the first time you were on the stream was, if I'm not mistaken, 2023, like August or something like that. Whenever episode 1 came out. That was so basically 2.5 years ago.
I'm gonna say that it may have even been 2022. Not to make time go any further than it already is, but I think August 2023. I was here in Minden. Ooh. So if I was back at HRD at the time, that's okay. You're gonna
make me check the YouTube. Hold on. Let's find out. Got to get our facts right. Unless I've completely forgotten how time works. I'm pretty sure we started this show. Started the YouTube channel in 2023 in April.
All right, so Phil, you if I'm right, then you drink, and if Doug's right, I'm going to see you take a sip.
Let's see, and that was when we were. I think that was just a video because we didn't have the YouTube live set up yet.
No.
All right, cool. It says 1 year ago. There's no way.
Oh, come on. We're all going to drink then.
I think that was because I uploaded it to YouTube later. So this was it's labeled June 1st, 2023.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
2023.
So not August.
June. Okay, June I will take.
June 2023. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So it's been 2 years.
2 years. Okay. Well, Cheers, my friends.
Yeah, cheers. You're ahead of us. I haven't put anything in the glass. Minden American Single Malt is probably not the first thing we'll talk about, but it's the first thing going in my glass. The unsanctioned tour of Minden Mill.
That was Clear Creek that I gave you the tour of. If you want a tour of Minden Mill, we're gonna have to work that out. Let's figure out something where I can just plow you through the place.
I think Pod Guys is referring to the time you sent me that like minute-long video where you walked through the distillery, or like right after you got there.
Yeah.
And I shared that on the Whiskey Lodge. But that was awesome. It was great to see that early look. So anyway, a little bit more of the intro. Just we should have a bigger than usual audience today. So and since it's a live chat, first of all, keep in mind, guys, we will ask your questions. So feel free to ask your questions in the chat, and we'll space that out throughout the interview. And the other thing is, what are you all drinking? And introduce yourselves to each other. For any of you who don't know each other, be a part of the community. You're on screen now, so that officially makes you a community.
I think that's how that works.
Yeah, something about Twitch streaming, which technically we are still streaming to Twitch. I don't know if anyone actually watches on Twitch, but we are technically still streaming to Twitch, and also Instagram. So in Instagram, we have a comment from Mana's Barrel Broker saying, "Nice to see you. Last time was in Tucson." So I believe that was a comment for Joe.
Oh, nice. I'm curious of this. All right, so I see one there. Please ask Joe about peat. I think we'll get to that. Our single malts is unpeated. I know that in terms of my heritage with American Single Malt, that might sound like a complete and aggressive departure from what I've historically done. But in this regard, I mean, you got to mix things up. You got to try something new, and we're aiming more space side.
Well, all right. So we've done plenty of stalling now. That's one of the things about going live, is making sure the audience can trickle in. But let's kick this thing off for real now. So without further ado, Joe O'Sullivan, for the people who don't know you, would you introduce yourself and tell us what you do?
I am Joe O'Sullivan. I'm the Master Distiller for Minden Mill Distilling, former Master Distiller for Hood River Distillers, which included McCarthy Single Malts for the folks that enjoy American Single Malt. Currently being run by a far better distiller than I ever will be, Caitlin Bartlemay. I see you on there, Bartlemay, and you know I love you desperately. Now I'm over here in Minden. We're growing. Something awful. She said it again. Now where I'm out here in the high desert, we are an estate distillery, which is an opportunity that I think I don't want it to be forgotten that the luckiest of us get to do this. We grow our own grains. An estate distillery means that 85% in Nevada, 85% of our fermentable grains come from land that we control. And I was just out in the rye fields today, just to see kind of how things were going. They're about up to here about now, and it's going beautifully. And that includes also barley, corn, wheat, depending on what we're growing that year. The value of that is really that it adds very interesting characteristics that are unique to your own whiskey. And so instead of considering this more of a forward-thinking approach of look how special they are, they get to grow their own grains. Yes, it feels wonderful to have that opportunity, but this is really a return to what distillation was before the grain itself was such a commodity that was traded upon. So instead of getting rye from Canada and corn from Indiana, we're growing our own corn, and we're growing our own rye. And whether that's an example of in the corn, with our bourbon, and earth tones corn that has, loaded with anthocyanins and carotenoids and just all this like incredible spice and cola notes, or our rye, which is just a normal winter rye, but exposed to some pretty challenging climate out here. High deserts, we're almost at 5,000 feet. The first time I had 2 beers when I moved here, I was rocked, which was a really unique experience as a 40-something-year-old man. And then it's also really windy. It's incredibly dry, which I can't wait to get into some of the conditions that we have to operate in. But what you see from that is a different expression. Whether you want to call that terroir, that it's an effect of climate on the grain itself, that's all things that we are really playing with and experimenting with right now.
I am so excited to talk about many of those things.
Let's get into it.
The first thing that stood out in my brain, I've recently, I think it's just that I hang out too much on Instagram following a bunch of distillers. But I've recently been learning a lot of like industry jargon, like depletion, which is where you go to a bar and ask for the product that you want to make sure stays on the shelves by making sure that it actually gets
always
consumed.
Be depleting. Always be
depleting. And the other is a thing that can happen with grain, which is lodging, where and so when you mentioned wind, I was thinking, oh, I wonder if lodging is a significant problem.
I can't believe you brought that up, because yes, that's the first time anyone's ever asked me such an in-depth grain question. It can be a really massive issue. Lodging could be a pain in the butt. For folks that don't understand what that is, that's when the grain decides to lay down during the growth, especially with something like rye. You have these beautiful cereal heads, then you have this itty bitty, skinny, wimpy little stalk. And lodging means that it falls over in the field and it doesn't dry out evenly because it's kind of thatched on top of itself. And in order to reach the 15% humidity that the grain is stable within the silo, you kind of have to wait until everything dries out. But if you wait till the lodge stuff dries out, then the rest of it might be too dry and it's going to be really friable. It's going to break up. It's going to mill poorly. And you won't get the same extraction. But if you don't wait and you have all of that lodged green rye introduced into the silo, then you're introducing moisture and you can get fungal infections, you get ergot. And so there's this delicate dance between the two that you always have to be kind of careful about.
So, and then of course, on the other hand, it being so dry, does that help at all with that problem?
No, yeah, it doesn't. I wish it did.
You would hope, right?
Yeah. You would hope. The dryness is always really interesting because the biggest issue we can have with dryness, and again, jumping right into the deep end with what estate distillation is like, is that Carson Valley, like I said, we're high desert. And so even though we have a really handsome water supply from snowmelt from the eastern Sierra Nevada mountains, the wind can just completely desiccate the seed at the top of the rye or the corn or whatever the grain stock is. And so you can throw as much water as you want at the roots, but what's at the very top will dry out way too early and you'll get crop and yield failures. You won't get as much as you wish that you had gotten, because it's just been completely wind whipped and broken.
By the way, Phil, that was adorable, and I didn't mind hearing the squeaky toy at all.
No, I kind of like that, by the way, Phil.
Oliver sends his regards.
Let's just really address that the star of this show is going to be Oliver, whether we want to be the stars or not. Like, Oliver, get on camera, please.
Come here, you muppet.
Fluffy.
Oh,
he's
look
puppy.
At you. So that one was that one designed by Jim Henson or Brian?
I think he's a little bit young to have been designed by Jim.
That's a Brian Henson design. I understand that entirely.
There is really something about that shaggy hair that just looks like there's a puppet going swapping that hair around.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure there's a wire attached to that dog's paw that just has it like.
Yeah, who's the off-camera operator there? All right, so I know that just for some background, we actually did interview Joe back in August about Minden Mill.
You were my first interview.
And yeah, we did have the distinction of being the first interview. And while I can always fall back on saying it's all about the book, we really did want to release that, but there was like this was one of those things we would have had to edit because, there were talking points that weren't 100% public ready at the time, right?
Yeah.
So basically, rather than edit our way around that, because we were never quite happy with how that came out, we figured we would just do another interview. And so we didn't get to claim first episode with Joe at Minden Mill released, but at least we can say between us we were the first interview. So
I know you guys were the first released or not. I think Whiskey Lore may have been the second, so that's still really great company.
Yep, and Bourbon with Friends, I believe you just did an interview with them. And Bourbon with Friends are great people. For anybody who, for one reason or another, may have stopped listening to Bourbon with Friends for a while, bear in mind, for about the last year, it's been a new set of cast. So you should check them out again if you haven't. They're good people.
Really amazing movie talk on that one, which I liked. No one had ever asked me what sort of movie my whiskey would be. I don't think Blue Velvet went as well over as it could have, but I couldn't think of a more funny answer than Blue Velvet. But I really enjoyed my conversation with them.
Joe, I love that you misspelled the Whiskey Lodge. No, not Joe. Our
not me, Joe. Other Joe.
Yeah, Pod Guys. Joe, the founder of the Whiskey Lodge, spelled it without an E just now, which is really funny to me.
That's
yeah. So shout out to the Whiskey Lodge with an E though, if you're looking for it on any of the ways to find Discord servers. Listen, we're having a couple McCarthys here. Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of, since I don't believe we've actually had a chance to speak on record with Joe about our barrel pick, I just want to bring up the McCarthy's barrel pick before we get too deep into Minden Mill, because our relationship with Joe goes all the way back to McCarthy's, and our relationship with the barrel pick is actually because Joe sent me the sample of the barrel that we ultimately ended up picking years later. So I just wanted to acknowledge that fact and say thank you, Joe. Our first barrel pick would not have existed without you.
Oh, it was honestly, I get caught up in a lot of things at work, but it means a lot to me when a good barrel winds up in the hands of people that I think will appreciate it. And I know it found a home with you all that, it's where it belongs. It's not so much me. The whiskey chose you guys as much as anyone else.
Yep. Fair enough. And I do want to say, as far as I know, there is still a case or two of that available, and the link to buy that is in the description. And as long as you're in the description, you can check out the previous videos that we have with Joe. You can check out Minden Mill, Joe's Instagram. You can check out, we've got an order form for our Glencairns, which are, okay, Phil, I might have to ask you to mute the mic.
Yep. Oliver found another toy.
So you can buy our Glencairns, the Whiskey Lodge Glencairn, which shout out to the Whiskey Lodge once again, and the Single Malt Frontier Whiskey Lodge Glencairn, which this is the, let me get my hand out of my face. This is the sticker that was on our barrel pick bottle, which is now immortalized on a Glencairn. So you can buy this as well. And we will be using that sticker in future barrel picks. And
I'm using a Glencairn from, it's not picking up at all, but my own very bourbon. This is a bourbon van, Glencairn, nice. Which I'm always happy to have.
Nice, yeah. Shout out to the bourbon van. Oh, I should have sent them a message that this interview was happening. Phil, can you do that if you get a chance? You have their contact, right? I'm assuming the silent yes I do, and yeah, cool. All right, feel free to unmute at any time, just with the background noise of the, yeah. By the way, as always, I want to emphasize, Phil, your comments are welcome, especially your tasting notes, and unmute anytime and interrupt me because I talk too much. So now that we've talked about McCarthy's, let's really get into Minden Mill. So the reason I brought up that earlier interview is because it's easy for me to think, oh, we've already asked those questions. But for the sake of the audience who hasn't heard that interview, let's take it back to the beginning and talk about, where did Minden Mill Distilling come from?
So Minden Mill was a shuttered distillery. At the time, it was known as Bentley Heritage, and the Foley family wines picked it up and recruited me. The goal of this whole distillery was really to drive the category forward a little bit. I know this sounds like marketing talking points, but the realistic value of being able to grow your own grain is the kind of thing that isn't just, I mean, if that's going to be marketing, then that's enticing me as a distiller straight to my soul. And there is real value in being able to own the chunks of land and the grain that comes off of it and the straw that's from that grain in order to produce whiskey and vodka and whatever we make that is of a place. And that sense of connection to the earth itself is something that inspires me every day. I'll just as a quick example, this very morning I'm driving from my house and I'm coming over from Carson City into the Carson Valley. There's this little dip out by the Home Depot out there. And you see for a moment this beautiful snow-capped mountains on your right, and you see the rye fields on your left. And you know that the water from that snow melt is going to feed the aquifer that we irrigate with and that we ultimately cut our whiskey with. And then I can look straight ahead and see the distillery. And every single thing that we make is derived from that scope, from that one view. For anyone that's familiar with me at my time at Clear Creek, this idea of sourcing locally, of trying to provide a spirit that is distinctive to a region is something that's valuable to me. I mean, you got to find new ways to drive your passion. In locality, that doesn't change. The Carson Valley is unique and will be unique long after humans are gone. But to be able to say at one point we made a whiskey that was distinct to this region, whatever the region is the most fun part of what we're doing. And that's certainly the most inspiring part to me on a daily basis, because I don't think I've ever crested that hill and not seen that view in front of me and thought I was going to have, I don't think I've ever done that and thought I was going to have a bad day. Every single time I see all of it, I'm like, okay, this is a great reason to go to work every day. And I can see that there's a question on there about like what it was like going from all these things. And the history of Minden Mill is more than just me. It's more than just the grain. It's also the people who work there. Because before it was Minden Mill, is a place called Bentley Heritage that never got to the point of releasing, but it was run by an incredibly talented group of people. I think the greatest luck I've had in my career is working with talented distillers and talented blenders. And this is certainly another notch in that belt. So coming in, I was able to learn a lot. I was able to say, wow, okay, I'm really good at fruit orchards and I understand pears well, and I understand peated single malt, but I don't really understand what we're doing here. And whether it's our distillers of Bryce, Chelsea, Noya, or our blender, John, or our maintenance team, Jim at bottling, and certainly Kerry, who runs so much of production. Like, these were individuals that they were picking up weight that I used to have to shoulder in a smaller operation. And I'm able to focus entirely on the brand growth. Not just that, but experimental corn pivots that we get to grow, and how to streamline production to make better spirits that are more predictable, more the same every time. And also saying like, hey, we have this hodgepodge of barrels, and we got some Kelvin, we got some Barrel Mill, and we have some Seguin Moreau. Let's dial this down to just one of them and figure and develop that relationship with our cooperages. So it's just a more in-depth approach than anything I've been able to do before. And I have always felt pretty connected to the products I make.
Awesome. I guess as long as we're addressing this question, let's see if we hit all of those points. So freedom to experiment. So
Lots
I think
of
we
it.
talked about scale and the scale of the team. But yeah, that freedom to experiment is definitely is a question that I'm really interested in as well, because you've got a huge team behind you. I know in terms of not that HRD was small,
no,
but as far as like, if we're talking about the whiskey made in-house at Clear Creek was a small part of the portfolio, but here Minden Mill is mostly whiskey. And so I think myself and probably a lot of other people are interested in the number of SKUs we're going to see come out, because we've only just seen the first run, the bourbon, the rye, the American single malt. We know, just spoilers, we know there's a few different types of casks in the American single malt, which means that there's at least a few different possible options for single barrels, at least. Not to mention potential expansions on finished bourbon and rye, different cask types of or different formulations of the American single malt, for example. There's so much potential here if the brand grows big enough. And so that question, as far as freedom of experiment goes, is a really important one to me.
I am encouraged to experiment to the point where, honestly, sometimes I want to say I have this isn't to say that I'm spending my time just goofing around, but like, I'm so encouraged to experiment that at times I have to turn it down because there's more immediate work to be done in terms of brand growth, making sure that everyone's functioning, making sure that there's not problems in the field, et cetera, et cetera. But we are a creative house, and we absolutely want to, we really don't want to lose sight of that. I would say our real heart of experimentation is going to start in about 2 to 3 years, where I'm personally more comfortable with it, where I'm like, okay, we've really gotten the flagships going. But in the meantime, we have this heritage because I'm not the only person there that's been curious and wanting to do new things. So we have barrels of floor malted single malts that we malted ourselves that are aging in orange wine barrels that we made the orange wine ourselves, aged it in the barrels for a little bit of time, and then dumped it out, then to just age the single malt in it as well. And the only reason I bring that one up is that I accidentally spilled the beans on that one on a previous podcast, and so I consider it like up for grabs for me telling the world. But there's other things too, and we have a whole line of like LTOs that we're looking at to come through the distillery, as well as down the road there will be conversations about easy additional line expenses, cask strength, single barrels, etc. But I have one idea that I'm so excited about that I'm going to keep quiet on it for now, because I think it has some real value in it, and it has some real philosophical value on it. But we also, when it comes down to even raw materials, I have 80 acres of experimental corn to see how it grows up here in the high desert, where we have a 90-day grow window. So putting in a lot of corn that might take 120 days to get to fruit, that's not going to work. It's going to be frosted over by then. So we have an Abenaki Indian corn, as well as Jumpin' Jimmy Red corn that we're going to be playing with this year. And to say that like our minimum experimental size is 40 acres, that is amazing. Like that's just like, oh, well, let's try something for fun. We'll do something small. What's it going to be? 80 acres. That's so incredibly cool to see the results of that, and to say, I don't know if anyone's really messed around with this corn before. Jumpin' Jimmy Reds, we all understand how that works, but then I want to understand the terroir of it in this location. But some of those Indian corns, like I've never tasted spirits from them. And if you look at the bourbon that we have and the earth tones dent corn that we use, it has notes of cherry cola that you would never get in anything else. So I'm excited to see this fall, when we finally harvest that corn, regardless of yield. Of course, I want a great yield. Everyone always wants a great yield. But my real passion on this is like, this is going to be an experiment, and I want to know exactly what this turns into. So you will see things that in the future that are down to bourbons I want to see a flight of bourbons of different, small little 200 milliliter bottles of like, this one's made with this corn, this one, and like limited releases to help educate the public. But I also really want to see a complete openness to trying new things coming out of our distillery, and quite honestly, everybody there is on board.
Fantastic. I was immediately thinking, so these are cool. These little flasks are cool. But now that you mentioned a 200 milliliter, what those flasks are 200 milliliters, by the way. Yeah. Now that you've mentioned 200 milliliters, I'm imagining this bottle in a cute 200 milliliter form factor in a box with 3 other bottles.
Yeah. I mean, that's the kind of stuff we get to do now.
That's awesome. So that experiment you mentioned, the one that that you spilled the beans on, about the orange wine, everything from your own estate, just estate barley, estate wine.
Not the oranges. We bought the oranges.
Okay.
Not the oranges. I wish it was, but they don't grow in the high desert very well at all.
But there's room for fully estate made experiments, and that's very cool to me.
Yeah,
everything made here.
That bottle with the single malt you have right there is 100% made entirely in our valley. and never left this. I mean, the first time it sees a land outside of the 3 or 4 or 5 miles from the corn pivots to the distillery, the first time it sees anything beyond that is when it leaves in the bottle.
That's super cool. I guess the bottle came from off the estate, but
well, the bottle came from off. I don't blow our own bottles. No.
Oh, that would be so cool if you had a glass blower on. By the way, hey audience, sorry for the sidebar, but I've met a couple of glass makers as I've gone to ACSA and people who do custom design bottles and that sort of thing. And let me know if that's something you would be interested in, because I'm fairly certain I could get us a tour or an interview with someone who actually makes the packaging that your whiskey goes into, which could be, I mean, to me, that would be interesting. I might do it just because I'm interested, but I'm interested to know if you're interested. So let me know. Anyway, check out this bottle. Can we just, for a second, talk about how awesome this is? As I understand it, this was at least partly Joe's concept, the shape of this bottle.
Oh gosh, no, that's entirely, I mean, I wouldn't take credit for that. I think I just said I really like traditional bottles with a little bit of a modern flair. That's about as much of a concept as I've had into it. We have had an incredible marketing and design team that works with us, and that's that's part of it as well.
See, now we're going to be distracted by the comments on screen. I'm just going to elephant in the room. One thing I don't like about this widget is it was covering up Phil's face. So I feel like if we're going to keep the widget, we've got to keep our faces all the same size, which is fine. We can do that. We'll see. We may not do this in the future. So this could be your only chance to have your comments on our show, just visibly on screen. Aside from when I will continue doing this. Hey, Freedom Malts, thanks for joining us. By the way, Joe, Atelier V says hi. I believe you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. You went and you were talking to him down there?
I haven't been there to talk to him yet, but we're in touch on Instagram, and he sent the comment over on the Instagram chat, which we can't see on screen here because Instagram doesn't play nice with the streaming platform.
Amazing whiskey coming out of New Orleans down there. Unbelievable.
Yep. And we also have Distillery Acadian scheduled for this podcast soon. So we have another New Orleans American Single Malt to talk about. Now, McCarthy's obviously first American Single Malt. Just a little preview of Distillery Acadian. They registered the first American Single Malt Cola, the first official label approval under the new type. So we have that fun bookend of like our first interview on this show was McCarthy's, and we're finally going to get a chance to interview the first official typed label, which is
wonderful. I want to try their stuff so badly, because to me that sounds like a really exciting new, like I just love more the merrier in the entire American Single Malt stuff. So I want to try it.
I think I can spare an ounce or two to send to you so you can try that.
I'll send you some of that orange wine nonsense too.
Ooh. All right, we're gonna stop talking about that. That's dangerous territory to have on record. Anyway, Riffraff's Elbow, I believe this is our first time seeing you in chat, so thanks for joining. Says those types of comparison box sets are great from a nerd perspective, but seem like a terrible business prospect. Seems tough to overcome the cost of short run bottling and packaging. That's an interesting point.
They're not wrong.
But nerds grow the brands.
Fun.
That's I'm just gonna go ahead and say nerds grow the brands, so that may outweigh the cost. It might.
Yeah, I mean, these are just concepts. We don't know what will happen, and these are all things that have yet to come. So we don't know if there will be a comparison box set. They're definitely not wrong. That is a labor of love and a respect for the industry type thing. Is it novel? Absolutely. Does it help the individual understand what is out there and what can be tried? Yeah, it does. And it doesn't have to be a distributed thing. Like, you can that can be the kind of thing that we only have exclusive to the tasting room, where people can try it in the actual setting that's produced. Yep, which definitely cuts down on the overhead.
Yeah, just do it as flights out of glassware instead of Well, if that does well enough, right? We can, fingers crossed, we're going to find some interesting experiments. Cool. Yeah. So we're learning now why we've gotten really good at doing pre-recorded podcasts where we keep it real focused and we get through the whole thing in an hour. And we're learning why having a live chat distracts us. And the fact that we've gotten good at doing 1 hour interviews and now we have a live chat back again is making that starkly clear. So I'm going to try to right this ship instead of having Phil do it for me. Let's get something in the glass. Joe, what should we try first? I think when I got this set initially, you said you were most interested to know what I thought of the rye. And I know that you're going to want to know what Phil's take on the rye is. But is that the best place to start?
I would say probably start you can do bourbon or rye either way. Let's start the rye this time. That seems to be a little bit more in vogue lately. So let's go rye first.
Yeah, I know. When we started this podcast, we're like, there's a million people talking about bourbon. There's a million podcasts with bourbon literally in the name. We're going to not do bourbon. We're going to do American Single Malt, which is our passion, my passion at least. Rye, I think, I don't know of a single podcast that is rye focused.
And rye is as much of a tradition to American whiskey as bourbon is as well. It just all has to do with where you're looking. I mean, the very first batch of rye was distilled in Salem, Massachusetts in like 1642. It was actually the second field of rye that was ever grown was made for that specific whiskey. And rye does really well in certain parts of this country, but over the majority of it, we're kind of too hot. We're a little too wet. Rye likes the cold in order to really grow and not get any fungal infections. And so it didn't take as much of a leading up to Prohibition. It was very popular, but as America expanded west, you started to see its decline. One thing that I really think that rye has had, that rye needs to be revisited in is the Western states making it, because if you don't have a lot of humidity, if you're cold, again, we're the high desert, we're 4,700 feet. It is chilly up here in the winter, and we do winter rye. And that means that we're getting some very good growing conditions for a grass that is used to growing in Poland or Russia. The manifestation of that in the sense of terroir is, you ask people out there who are familiar with whiskey, how do you define rye? They will say, oh, it's all black pepper. You get this really lot of black pepper and spice in there. And I understand that. But rye is more complex. And for ours, that spice category doesn't manifest to me as black pepper as much as it does that it manifests as like a candied orange. And so you get this really nice citrus note. And since we're using the same winter rye everyone else is, same winter rye that my friends at fantastic distillery, Catoctin Creek, just one of the best in the country, they use, but you see such a different execution of the grain itself. That has to be coming from the climate and the soil that it's grown in. And we've partnered up with the Estate Whiskey Alliance out of the University of Kentucky just to very much pursue how do we define terroir within grain and what the value of it is, because this is a return to that natural pre-prohibition grain, not as a commodity, but as a creative premium material. That's what we're trying to achieve with this. That all being said is we're keeping our, I don't want anyone to think we're getting too fancy. Like our whiskey's like $45. We're trying to keep the dollar down to make sure it's accessible. This is about brand growth and making something nice that is, achievable and affordable for everyone.
Before I give my tasting notes, I just want to acknowledge Carrie Daniels popped in. Good to see you. Your comments on screen now. That's a new widget that StreamYard is giving us. You've got some fans definitely in chat. I know for a fact that Old Man's Irish Pub has a bottle of your single malt as well as a bottle of your rye. So I think that speaks to the power of the brand already, or at least the power of the advertising behind the brand. Maybe the power of having Joseph O'Sullivan at the head.
Oh gosh, I hope not.
Minden Mill has already been in the hands of a lot of people. I've seen people really excited about these products. So you're not just hearing it from me, although it would have been cool to be the first person to release an episode with you. I can at least now say I'm not just puffing up a product. There's a lot of people who genuinely love these products already.
Oh, Doug, I think it would be silly for me to not say that there's a part of my career which I owe to you and Phil in the lodge. You've always inspired me, you've always supported me, and so I don't take that lightly. Thanks for always being my friend, even though I'm too busy to hang out these days.
Well, I was just trying to convince Bartlemay to come over for dinner at my house, and using the fact that you've done so as as leverage. So it goes both ways. Thanks for saying that. I've really enjoyed being able to give you some early feedback on some products over the years.
Oh, you've been amazingly helpful.
Doesn't necessarily make it onto the podcast, but I'm at least saying that happens, so the audience can believe me or not.
No, you both of you were like super early on my try this. Am I crazy or is this okay? Type conversations, and I get a lot out of it. So thank you.
Yeah. Speaking of, I got to try an early formulation of the McCarthy's PX, and I did just get a fresh bottle of the 2024 batch of McCarthy's PX. I wonder if you've gotten a chance to try that one.
I have not. I can't answer anything of that, but I saw it. I saw it on the shelf the other day, and I didn't buy it, and I know I really regret it. I was just too lazy to check my bag coming back from Oregon. I should just call one in, and then we can have the judgment of Bartlemay if you want, where we get like me and Garrett and all of these people to just try to let's she's doing way too good these days. Let's really bust her down, just aggressively.
That sounds like an amazing panel. Everyone I know who's ever distilled McCarthy's on a single call. I know Phil is down for that.
As long as I get samples, right?
Oh, yeah, right. It would be kind of fun to get a few other people in on that. There's a couple other distillers who have been around and brewers who have been around that have made McCarthy's over the years that I would love to toss onto that podcast as well.
Yeah, one of our best episodes was a panel about mesquite smoked barley. So I think we could do another panel. I've been thinking about some panels. Do more bigger, better panels. But anyway, let's get back on this rye. We've got about half an hour left, so I want to make sure that we responsibly use the time. So orange peel for sure, or something like a tart, almost like tangerine kind of thing, is a flavor note that I find to some degree in every one of the Minden Mill products that I've had so far. But it is especially prominent in the rye. Goes really well with that sort of typical rye grassiness or herbalness. But this rye, my personal take, I'm not a rye drinker per se, but Phil is, so Phil can weigh in. My take on this rye is that this rye is a little bit more of a bourbon drinker's rye. It doesn't go so super heavy on the herbal, but it is bringing some flavor profile notes that I don't think I could get in a bourbon or a single malt. There's something really unique about this rye. And I'll spoil up front. I think out of everything in this portfolio so far, the thing that is most stand out from its category is actually the rye. I think this is a really unique bottle that everybody should have, because this is an extreme of rye flavor that you can't get elsewhere, in my opinion. But my rye experience is limited, so so maybe chat will correct me. I know Freedom Malts is also a big rye lover, so let me know if I'm off base on that.
I also want to know what Phil thinks, because Phil, you and I have had a lot of really good rye conversations over the years, and I'm curious.
I haven't gotten a bottle of the release yet. Mostly because every time I go to order it, there's something that has come up. But I've got some pretty detailed notes on the sample that I have been sent.
Same one as we had 6 months ago, right? Which is the final formulation.
That's the final formulation, yeah.
Oh, okay. It is incredibly like warming, and it's got like a very balanced, cohesive, warm core that has just nice layers of like herbal cut grass, and I mean not grass, but like cut hay, and like the slight spice of like fennel and a little bit of black pepper, orange rind, and just a little bit of like cloves or cardamom or something in there that just nicely rounds it out. And there is that little bit of like nice, like warm caramel flavor in there that just a touch of sweetness that just really, really balances the herbality and the spice in a way that I really enjoy.
I love that. I would say that one of the things I agree with you entirely, the warmth of it, the welcomingness of it, the fact that it had, I thought cardamom was a really great grab in terms of flavor notes, but it had that like that honey golden hour type appeal to it that you don't get in a lot of whiskeys. And once again, I don't think there's any way I could attribute that to anything we're doing as much as I can attribute it to just existing in the place that it's grown. This is a really difficult environment. I've been told to use the word challenging, not difficult, because quite honestly, it is challenging. We get 10 to 11% average humidity. I sometimes wake up and it looks like somebody, just somebody committed a murder on my pillow from a nosebleed just that I got over the night. It's really dry. And we were getting on average when we were maturing by the local environment, we were getting an average of about 2 to 3% angel share loss per month, where for the folks out there, we should be looking at 5% a year, which is an incredible difference. So we were losing a ton of it. And our respect for just the heritage of these things means that we're going to climate control our barrels. So even though and why I think it's so tightly attached to the terroir is that we've tied our rick house to a weather station in Bardstown, Kentucky. So the maturation phase of it is exactly identical to the same humidity and temperature as Bardstown, but you still get these other flavor components that are being revealed within the spirit itself. And that to me has to be coming from the grounds. We're using an Arnold Holstein still. So these are very similar to the stills that we used at Clear Creek. I'm super familiar with them. We're using wooden foeders so we're fermenting in a wooden fermenter rather than a stainless fermenter. So we're going to get a very stabilized yeast that's going to be coming in and just being established in the walls. That is going to be pretty much maintained solidly throughout the entire process. And then you still get this citrus and this warmth and this honey that manifested as like it's not even like a light honey, it's like a darker honey. It has that little bit of treacle in it, and that's going to be just something that's distinct to the growing conditions we have here, because this is not an ornamental rye. They don't make ornamental rye. This is something that we are buying the same seeds as everyone else, but the end result is something special, and that's coming from the land, I'm convinced.
Yeah. So estate rye in large quantity in this one, or
are
you sourcing in what you need? Oh, entirely.
No. We are 100%. There's been a couple times where our malting facility broke down that we've gotten stuff malted somewhere else, but it's still our grain. We are 100% an in-house unit. This is all our rye. Not a single bit of grain has come from anywhere other than just the Carson Valley.
That's remarkable. So all right. So 80 acres for a plebeian non-farmer like myself, and I imagine most of the audience, could you give us an idea of like how many barrels of whiskey of yield 80 acres is going to get per growing season, or anything else that can contextualize for us how much 80 acres is?
So let me do a little math. 68. So that's just 80 acres. Just to not be too, not to try to make this any bigger. We actually have, we are able to grow up to 1,200 acres. And so the 80 acres that we just have is entirely, it's entirely just for that experimental growth. But to understand, so 80 acres on an average growth is going to get 2 tons of yield of 2 tons of grain, which translates into 320,000 pounds, which divide that by 10,000, 32. So it's going to be like 320 barrels. and that's if
for the 80
well,
acres,
or for that 80 acres.
For the 80, okay.
That's for the 80. And so you can kind of see the scale of what we're trying to do here. And that scale really helps us deliver things that are good, consistent, well under control. But again, it allows us to sell it and make it a popular item. Like you can, if you are lucky enough to grow all your own stuff, you do see some pretty fun little savings that come up where you're like, heck, I can actually like get this stuff out there to the peoples. And then that's also just like real crude back of the napkin math. That's nothing particularly accurate.
I still appreciate that because I mean, if anyone had any doubts that this is a nerdy podcast, we just did math live. Okay. Like,
yeah, I'm very sorry about that.
I would also like to offer for those of you who are having trouble visualizing, like in your mind's eye, what 80 acres looks like. The National Mall, the area around the Washington Memorial, is about 106 acres. So think about standing at the far end of that immense stretch of grass between the sort of on the far side of the Washington Monument from the reflecting pool between it and the Lincoln Memorial. That's about 100 acres.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So just slightly less than that.
Yeah.
That's
a lot of space.
This may help me more than other people. I went to UT Austin, which touts its 40 acres main campus, which is, if you draw the lines just right, you can come up with some version of that is actually 40 acres, but it's a little weird. I used to run a lap around the outside of the 40 acres, at least according to me, the way I drew the lines. And that was about 2 miles. So something like I might be misremembering that because 25 minutes I'm a slow runner, but yeah, something like that. So that's a good stretch of land to get across, twice that length, right? Yeah. So imagine running for 20 minutes or so, and that's outlining half of that field.
And again, I mean, when you see 1,200 or 1,000 acres or 800 acres planted, like it doesn't mean anything anymore. It's just this expanse of green ahead of you, and it's very cool. I wish I could. I wish I could share my screen. Is there a way to share a screen here?
A 40-acre lot is a quarter mile by a quarter mile. Okay, so I may have just been wrong about what the 40 acres was, because again, they call it the 40 acres, but that's referring to like 200 years ago, the university, and it's changed a lot since then. So I could just be completely off. Let's see. So yeah, okay. Or maybe I'm just remembering wrong that it was 2 miles. Maybe it was just a mile, because a 40-acre lot is a quarter mile by a quarter mile means that going around the outside of it is a mile. So, all right. We're doing too much math now, and
way too much math.
I've had officially too much whiskey in me to actually do math anymore, which is all of a half ounce of whiskey. I'm notorious. I probably told you this story before, Joe. If I've had any amount of alcohol, do not ask me to calculate the tip at a restaurant.
Yeah. No, I've had to do it for you. It's.
I once accidentally tipped 50% because I could not do any kind of math after I'd had a single drink. Do astronomy next. I'll think about how we'll work that in. Never work with children, animals, or math on camera.
It's about 1/1000. It's about 1/1 billionth of an AU, Bartolome. That's a short for astronomical unit. It's a distance between here and the sun.
Yeah. The average. Yeah. What are we even doing here, guys?
Yeah, no, we got to grow.
All right. Let's at least move on to start talking about the bourbon. I think. By the way, those were fantastic notes, Phil. I have nothing to add. You are much better doing verbal tasting notes than I've ever been. Which, by the way, for anyone who doesn't know, the Ranger's Respite is a YouTube channel that existed in the years prior to this podcast, where Phil regularly did video reviews of whiskey. Including Van Winkle Rye 13-year-old, if I'm not mistaken. So, Phil's existed on the internet longer than I have.
Spoiler alert, I appreciate the Minden Mill Rye more pound for pound, or perhaps dollar for dollar, than the Van Winkle Family Reserve Rye, even at MSRP.
I'm gonna quickly mute my mic and put my cat out of the room. Pour the bourbon. I'll be right back.
All right, gonna nose some tasting notes on the bourbon. So part of the game here, Phil, is going to be for us to find the distillery profile that runs through all of these products. So for me, that sort of orange peel is there still, but I'm getting a lot more like there is a bourbon cherry note on this.
Yeah.
And there's also something that I attribute to being a unique flavor profile note. I didn't quite get it on the rye, but I am getting it on the bourbon. Mentions cat, then doesn't show cat. Joe, Terry is absolutely correct. What are you doing?
Yeah, I know. I really need to fix that. For the this is the cat that I saved from the back of Clear Creek. She ran in during a storm. Her name is Chickpea. She's a pretty great cat. If she was in the room, I'd bring her back in.
Fair enough. But with something like 17 minutes left, I want to make sure we have plenty of time to talk about the single malt. So let's do a brief stop on by the bourbon.
Yeah, so, and I'm not going to distract any longer either. And the bourbon's going to be 60% of earth tone corn. So this is a dent corn, but it still is a very it's loaded with anthocyanins. It's loaded with carotenoids, and that's going to contribute a fair amount of interesting flavor to things. This, I would say, if you're going to look for a central flavor note on it, this is all cherry cola all day long. Like it is just that. It's got that spice. It's got that cherry note, but it's also got a little bit of apricot in as well, and a toffee kind of burned sugar type quality to it as bit.
Yeah, I was going to say hard caramel, which is basically toffee is what I mean. Yeah,
definitely at that like a little bit deeper in, and these are all number 3 char American oak barrels and it's aged in that same rick house.
Rich gets us. Yeah, it's bourbon now. The single malt. No, so like let's do it justice though. This is a very good bourbon.
So I should say this bourbon, it did just get the gold at the Ascot Awards, which in a moment I'll tell you about the rest.
Okay, so the nose reminds me honestly a lot of Wild Turkey, but with a little bit more of a buttery quality to it. So you've got a lot of that cherry. Yeah. It's that bourbon cherry. Like we don't review a lot of bourbon on this podcast, but I would say that in some ways, this bourbon is hitting right down the middle of what bourbon is. I would almost say, the fact that it has a softness to it makes it a good introductory bourbon because it's not weak in flavor, but it's not smashing you over the head with oak either, which I think is something that puts people off sometimes. People who don't like Kentucky bourbon, I think it's because it's too oaky.
I think I agree entirely, and I think that's in part because of Yellow Dent, which is a great corn. I mean, we mess around with it for fun on occasion. We were doing some today to see kind of how things came out. It smells great. It distills wonderful. It's a wonderful corn, but it's pretty neutral in terms of a distillate. So that oak comes through really strong in a lot of Kentucky bourbons, which I have nothing against. I mean, Elijah Craig is he was an amazing man for introducing that to us, but I like kind of pairing it up with a little bit of a stronger new make. And this was all stuff that, our team has been working on for a long time.
I have one tasting note that is a little bit different from the average bourbon, I think. There's a kind of hard candy that I used to buy from the general store on my way to hiking in the mountains. Clay's hard candy. It's made from an herb.
I think I know where this is going.
The name of which is difficult to say on online without getting into trouble. It's
it's fine. We're marked 18+, so it's called Horehound.
Yeah, exactly.
Yep. Whorehound hard candy. Actually, now that you've mentioned that, this is something not a lot of people who haven't hung out in like Old Town general stores would really know about these days, or who remembers grandma's candies. But like grandma's candies were like Whorehound, Lemon Drops, and Werther's, right? Yeah, I believe it's spelled HOAR, if I'm not mistaken.
I'm bringing it up right now. Yeah, HORE.
Oh, HORE. Okay.
It looks amazing.
Yeah, it's a really interesting flavor that isn't quite like anything else. And now that you've mentioned it, Phil, it's definitely in here. And as far as the palate goes, even though I get the typical wood spice notes on the nose from this bourbon that I expect from like a Kentucky bourbon, or like in a way, this even reminds me of Trail's End, which Joe helped create, Trail's End from Clear Creek. On the or read Where the Red Fern Grows. But that doesn't tell you how it tastes. So
I refuse to discuss that book.
It's a brutal book. I'm still traumatized.
See, when I had the choice of reading that book or Clockwork Orange in high school, I read Clockwork Orange. So I actually have never read that book.
That's the most upsetting thing you've ever told me.
Look, I didn't know the plots of any of these books, so I just picked one. Actually, the reason I picked Clockwork Orange is because I had heard about the dialect that the author invented, the sort of mix of English and Russian, and that was fascinating to me as a language nerd.
So a very important question just got brought up about Mr. Andrew Healy. All right, I want this.
Don't get distracted.
But I know we're going to get distracted. Everybody has to talk about Andrew Healy, including you, Bartolome. You had a nice night with him.
Okay, are we doing that later or now?
Nah, let's do it. Let's talk about single malt, and then I'll make sure to stick on.
All right, okay. So just one last closing comment on the bourbon. So even though you get the typical wood spice notes on the nose, as soon as you put it in your mouth, it is really creamy, and the butteriness of it comes out. And there's room for a little bit more of the herbal notes in there, and sort of that meaty Maillard reaction, which is the flavor note that the bourbon has in common with the single malt, and is a great transition over to the single malt now. I think that is something that Minden Mill is bringing to the table flavor profile that doesn't come from a lot of brands. And I'm gonna lead the witness and ask Joe why that might be. I have a theory, and it has to do with the way the stills are heated.
Yeah, that's a huge part of it. And you brought that up at a really interesting time because we just had a massive Speyside tasting at the distillery. And one of the Speyside distilleries that we tasted was one of the only other distilleries that heats at their stills in our same fashion. And they had many of the same notes. And every one of the distillers and the two vintners that we had on campus today sat up and paid attention. Minden Mill is...
And we're saying, just to clarify for the audience, Speyside distillery tasting doesn't mean a tasting of different Speyside distilleries. It means a tasting of the distillery called Speyside Distillery.
It can be... It could be either.
But in this case.
Yeah. So one of the things that's really interesting about our system is that we use what's known as a thermal oil calandria. And this is back in the day when I was at Clear Creek. Caitlin, the Bartolome knows this too. We were direct fire. I think one of the days I wandered in there after I moved on to do some consultation, it was immediately after a flashover. So basically somebody had caught vapor on fire against the firebox, alcohol vapor, and it creates this massive little flame and sets off all of this horrible smelling black water coming out of the sprinklers. There's just not a lot of direct fire distilleries that exist anymore. Because of that danger. And I'm not saying that distilleries are dangerous places. They're not by any means. But you do always have that risk. And Minden Mill is in the middle of a downtown area. And we're right in the middle of Minden, Nevada, which is close to Lake Tahoe, just to give people some understanding of location. And, with that proximity to just immediately downtown, you have this obligation to do things a little bit safer. And so in order to hit the same sort of flavor characteristics that are generated under direct fire distillation, where because you're exceeding 160 degrees Celsius, where the Maillard reaction starts putting sear on steak, that is the temperature that all distilleries become tasty at, or all food becomes tasty at. It's the crumb on bread, it's the sear on steak. Because you're exceeding 160 degrees Celsius, you wind up getting this more interesting flavor and ester development in the new make whiskey itself. So this is known as a thermal oil calandria. And it's basically a boiler heating steam that hits thermal oil. And when I say oil, don't get freaked out. It's just mineral oil. It's the same thing you would put on your cutting boards. It's food grade. It's totally easy. It's nothing, right? But it can have a larger thermal load, and that goes through an insert inside of the still that allows us to safely reproduce what's considered direct fire distillation temperatures. And you see this as a signature of a lot of both Speyside Distillery and Speyside region spirits, of having this more fruit bend to it. And it's just a whole new approach to distilling that you wouldn't see if it wasn't for the fact that we were the first distillery in the country to use this. If not the first in the world, it's been used in brewing for quite some time. But increasingly, it's seen as not just a really effective way to hit higher temperatures safely, but once you get, if you incorporate it correctly, where this whole heating system also heats the ambient flooring, it allows you to have less of an environmental impact. And as a result, the building that you see behind me in this image is we're LEED Gold certified. So we have a very, very small footprint on any sort of environmental impact because of these sort of innovative approaches to what we do. And ultimately, to me, I think it just makes a more fruit forward and kind of like ester filled, lots of fruit compote quality of spirit. And before you think we're totally crazy, just to prove that this is like the silliest thing that I ever could have signed up for, I told you that our rickhouse for our bourbon and our rye was attached to a weather station for temperature and humidity in Bardstown, Kentucky. Well, the other rickhouse where we have dunnage style racks for the single malt is attached to a weather station in Belinda Loch, Scotland. So you can stand in the sweaty, dusty middle of this parking lot in Minden, Nevada, walk into this hot, oppressive, intense humidity of Bardstown, Kentucky, walk back out, and now you're in this kind of chilly, cold, coastal Northeast Scotland setting. And mind you, the one that's supposed to reproduce Scotland is the one that puts on the most stress because it's working against high desert heat. But this is the kind of stuff that we're trying to do there. And if you do it right, once you get that thermal load in the barrels, it's very self-sustaining.
That's fantastic. I don't think I've ever heard of anyone else doing that, where climate control means make the climate like somebody else's climate.
If you're going to be inspired in your career, you might as well give homage on occasion. And while we are devoutly local in all of our sourcing of raw materials, we can't keep ourselves to trappings that wouldn't be good for the product. And so for us, we're going to deliver you a really interesting whiskey that we're growing ourselves. But if we can't use this natural environment to age, we're going to find something that's really freaking cool to do with it. And so, there's no reason to be pedants about our philosophy. We're just trying to make the best things possible.
Yeah. So that's a really interesting, and I guess we'll talk about this as more time goes on, and time will tell. But that's a really interesting take on terroir, where take somebody else's climate for the aging. And then let's talk about specifically what the estate brought.
Mm-hmm.
Because the sort of traditional interpretation of terroir is the land and the plants, what they brought to the table. Because for something like wine, those plants exist for a long time. The earth is really important, and there's a lot less time in a barrel. So, and there's also no distilling step and so on. And that's why people generally balk at the term terroir as used in wine being applied to whiskey, because whiskey is almost the opposite, where the grains are freshly planted and live in the ground for only a season, then come out, and then they go through many chemical transformations, a distillation step, lots of aging, many, many years. and then come out the other side and saying, and this has terroir is a challenging concept for some people, juxtaposing the wine versus the extremely different whiskey. But if you can isolate, as you've done, what's coming out of the ground from the aging factors, you've just made that exploration of terroir a lot more focused.
And that's part of what we're doing with the University of Kentucky. Like this is a whole part of trying to push the industry, and you're going to see a lot more talk about estate distilling in the next 6 months to a year. I promise you, because there's other people doing it. It's not just us. It's a bit of a movement, and now that American Single Malt has been ratified, I apparently can't take a break.
Yeah, and great comment from the chat. This is an incredible flex. You're sacrificing fast maturation in favor of slow.
Oh, yeah, that's entirely the point. Thank you for, I mean, that is like 100% the point, is that it's not about getting it out there fastest. I mean, this is a 5-year, which is fine. And I'm really happy with it. No, it's not fine. It's great. I love this. This also just got both the rye and the single malt got platinum at the Ascot Awards, which I wanted to give a big hand to John Crumbly, our lead blender, for making that happen. I mean, he's the guy that forms all the basis, all the heart and soul of those whiskeys. Being a master distiller these days, I'm going to spoil the illusion. It's about trying to represent a really great team of people and bringing them in a direction that everyone is successful. But I refuse to not allow the sun to shine on the people who are making a difference to me every day at work. And that's people like John. And so like getting that validation, like from the Ascot Awards, like that felt really good, you know? You know, I love where it's at 5 years, but I can't help but think about where it's going to be at 12 years. I just can't. Like, I'm happy with this. I'm so satisfied, but I really want time to speed up so I can be there and try it. Like that would mean the world to me. And I went through that with McCarthy's, and I saw the beauty it creates.
So I also want to point out, so in addition to being 5 years old, this is 47% alcohol, which is a respectable proof, non-chill filtered, and is in that range where you don't need to chill filter. And you know, like any good whiskey who cares about chill filtration, it's written on the front label that it's non-chill filtered. For the proof hounds, this is an extremely flavorful whiskey. This is very dense in flavor. I have a cask strength sample here, and I'm not going to say I don't like it. It's one of those things where being like a good whiskey at a stronger strength brings out different qualities, but it's not necessarily that it's better for being higher proof. 47% is a great proof level for this whiskey. It really shows a lot of complexity. And considering what we were just talking about in the slow aging, 5 years old, and the amount of flavor and complexity we're getting out of this is really impressive.
And a lot of that's going to be coming from that calandria system. The Maillard reaction has a massive effect on the quality of whiskey. And it isn't to say that you can't make good whiskey without it. You absolutely can. You can make the best whiskeys ever with just a steam system, but to have additional tools just allows you different ways to pivot, and this is just another tool that we have.
Yeah, and Jason makes a great point. Not convinced more proof is necessarily even helpful in a younger whiskey. Yeah, that may be true. It could be that you get a lot more harshness out of a higher proof. Some people will say cask strength, because let me water it down myself. On the other hand, slow proofing is a thing that's getting more and more attention these days, where
we proof very slow.
You can't necessarily get your cask strength bottle and dump some water in it and get the same result. Slow proofing does have a qualitative difference. So more than subjective, I think chemistry wise, there's a qualitative difference in slow proofing.
Yeah, when we take about at least 2 weeks to proof down something, and so for the folks out there, slow proofing might be something like you take a barrel of 120 proof whiskey, and then the first day you bring it down to 110, and then 105 the next day, and you allow this to just become it's on another. Yeah,
crash proofing is great on the nose for 90 seconds. This is where we get the idea that you grab one of these droppers and you put a few drops of water in your whiskey. It doesn't really water it down, but it just blasts open the flavor a little bit. But you can do that with a 47% whiskey also.
Yeah, the risk that you get with crash proofing is saporification. So you wind up getting some of the oils will come out of solution and almost form soapy like compounds and flavors. And that's entirely because the flavor esters are going to be hydrophobic within the solution. So by trying to introduce more water into a mostly alcohol solution, you're going to find those things become incredibly hydrophobic, and then they pull themselves into a ball, and then they taste kind of soapy, which is why you want to slow proof, especially as you approach the bottlings. Like I said, first day it might be from 110 or from 120 to 110, then 105, and then 103, and then you slowly walk it down. The more time you have, the better. There is a point where it's diminishing returns, so don't take the next 3 months in slow proof. There's no reason, but that's kind of what the whole effect of it is. And then I have to say, and I want to be on, if we can get me on in the next couple of months, that would be amazing, because I could talk to you guys all night, but I have a very important dinner date with my wife. So I want to make sure that I answer the question about Andrew Healy, which is incredibly important, because Andrew Healy's widely known as the Irish whiskey lad. He's one of the bigger educators on Irish whiskey out there.
Yeah. So you said you had a question around his time with Andrew Healy. Is that just an open-ended question, or do you have a specific question there? So until we get a specific question, let's get the open-ended. Tell us about it.
Yeah, just Andrew Healy is the guy I've known forever. He represents a company called Two Stacks for any Irish hounds out there. Two Stacks is amazing. He also represents a brand called Killowen. Killowen is for real some of the best Irish whiskey I've ever had in my life. Hard to find, truly amazing. Brendan at Killowen is doing incredible work, but the boys at Two Stacks are doing some of the best bonding and bottling that I've ever had. In Ireland, a lot of the tradition is bonding. So you will buy whiskey from other people, you'll age it and mature it yourself. And that's what Two Stacks is the return towards it. So it's more of a elevated or artistic form of independent bottling, a lot like you see here in our friends at like Lost Lantern and stuff like that. These are folks in their own right, are whiskey experts and have talents that the average distiller doesn't have. But Andrew just represents both of these gangs. Like I just had the wonderful opportunity to bum around Portland, Oregon with him for a couple of nights, and it was just the best. Oh gosh.
So Pon says Andrew said, I'm just going to read the comment because, again, a lot of people just listen. Andrew told me the ASMW was fabulous and wants to know your thoughts on what he shared and what he answered.
Listening to Andrew Healy, again, Irish whiskey lad, it's pretty humbling when he says something like that, because he doesn't just have the knowledge of a really expert whiskey taster. He has the soul of a whiskey enthusiast on a scale that like is infectious. And so he's really about embracing flavor and depth, but you can know that when he's talking to you, that if you were to ever do a backstep on or insult tradition, he would, it would resonate with him. So we were at a big meeting together, and it was me and Andrew, and we busted out some of the single malt to the folks at Two Stacks and to Andrew himself. And he said, this is some of the best American malt I've ever had in my life. And he stopped and he said, it's some of the best malt I've ever had in my life, which was incredibly, those are the kind of sweet things that you hear that make you realize that you're part of a great group and you're part of a good business and a good brand, because he really means it. He's just not a guy that can separate tradition, and this is his own culture. Andrew is in fact Irish. He's not like a Joe O'Sullivan with an apostrophe in his name. Like, he's from Ireland. And when for him to say something, you know that he is viewing he sees that the respect that you have from he is also weighing in your views on the tradition that we as distillers are keepers of. And he knows that we are part of that larger historic brethren or camaraderie, for lack of a better word, that connects us all together. And I have to say, one of the greatest parts of my career is that we go back to the alchemists. We've been around since Taputi. We've been around since the bubonic plague, and we will be around into the future as well. And it is just one massive lineage. And Andrew sees that the way that we do. So his comments were really heartfelt, and they meant a lot to me. So if you want to know great stuff about what's out there in Irish whiskey Lad's a good man to follow. And also check out Two Stacks and Killowen, because the stuff at Killowen is honestly, I think, he's reinventing what Irish whiskey can be. He's part of a new movement, if not the leader of it. Brendan is fantastic, and I would love to make something with him. I've kind of wanted to do an Irish style whiskey, but I don't want it to seem like one of those things like I'm claiming to be Irish. But I still can't, I can't separate who my grandparents were. Like they mean a lot to me. So I would love to work with him on something in the future. I think it'd be pretty darn cool.
Awesome. Well, I know Brendan loves you. He's said as much to us. By the way, episode 9 of our podcast was Brendan Carty of Killowen Distillery. So you should watch that. Absolutely.
Yeah, jump on that one right away.
They're doing Irish whiskey in more of a traditional way. They've got poitín. They're direct fired still. And they're using the old recipes. So in some ways they are unique in the level of tradition that Brendan maintains there. And that is among the best whiskey in the world that I've ever had personally.
I am humbled by his whiskey on every single time I consume it.
And I'm glad I'm not the only one saying. I'm glad an Irish person is saying as well that some of the best American single malts are some of the best whiskey in the world. And Minden Mill American Single Malt and McCarthy Single Malt are both among my top 5 whiskeys in the world, without question. I would even say, I have said before, I will continue to say, McCarthy's is my number 1 favorite whiskey in the world, despite perhaps lack of an age statement, which isn't that important to me. And I'm looking forward to really cool experiments coming out of Minden Mill, because this is pushing up there. This is the easiest drinking whiskey I think I've ever had in my glass. I accidentally took too big of a sip, and I said, I'm okay with that. It didn't burn. It was absolutely delicious. This glass, I'm not used to this glass, so I went for a sip like I would normally in a Glencairn, and the curvature of the glass just being different. It was just like whoosh, and I'm like, okay, that's what's happening.
I'm kind of in love with those little Minden tasters. I don't know why. I love the shape. It's so cute.
It's definitely something to get used to. It lets you put a lot less whiskey in the glass and get all this surface area at the bottom, which you can't necessarily get in a Glencairn. But I've also poured, I don't know where to stop, right? I know where a half an ounce and an ounce and an ounce and a half is in a Glencairn. I don't know where any of those things are in the Minden Mill. So when I poured this for my Instagram pictures, I had 2 ounces in the glass. I had no idea. I had to measure it afterwards. I was like, how much did I actually pour? But anyway, we got to let you go. So
I got a dinner date with my wonderful, supportive wife, who I just think is the best. I think a few of you have met her actually, which is really nice. But that being said, anyone who's looking for our stuff, I'm really happy to be able to say, just go to mindenmill.com, go to shop. I don't know if that link will help you in your state, but it's a start. And we're really looking to do something good. And to the folks at the Whiskey Lodge, I'm really happy to say hello again. And I miss you all. And to Skip, I just want you to know, if you listen to the one, I think it was the episode I had with Bourbon with Friends, they said they were from Louisville, and I gave you a shout out. Just so you know, Skip, I gave you a shout out.
I love that. Like if you listen closely to all of Joe's interviews with various people, he shouts out Skip as often as he possibly can.
Oh, as many times.
It's like a nice little Easter egg for people who are fans of Joe. So yeah, go listen to those. We don't have time to do our blend and everything, and I don't want to, because the American Single Malt is by far my favorite, and I'm happy with it just as it is. So with no further ado, Joe, thank you again for coming back and joining us again on the podcast. And I would love to have you back in 3 months, where we can somehow we managed to not talk about anything we got in our first interview. So that actually means that's usable content now.
Yeah.
But in addition, it means we've got plenty more to talk about. So
Well, I mean, just for the record, I love being on the show, and you know kind of how busy I've been. So cheers to you guys. Thanks for having me on, and I want to be on again soon. So book me, please. Cheers.
Absolutely. Cheers. And everyone in the chat, everyone who's watching in the future, if you like what we do, like, subscribe, share with your friends, tell people. We do these live every so often. Used to be exclusively live, but we love having you here in the chat. So come on in whenever you can. Until next time, we'll see you in the lodge. Bye, everybody.